Welcome to Diverse Pathways in Educational Leadership, part of Leadership Month 2021, presented by the USC Rossier School of Education. Now, please join me in welcoming the moderator for today's session, Stefanie Phillips, Chief Executive Officer of the Chamberlin Education Foundation.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Diverse Pathways in Educational Leadership. I am Stefanie Phillips, Rossier School grad, EdD candidate 2005. My background here is diverse in and of itself, in that I have a finance background, having received an MBA from a different school in California back in 1994. So longtime educator of 21 years, currently serving as CEO of Chamberlin Education Foundation, a nonprofit that works in Richmond to strengthen and ensure that educational access is granted to traditionally underserved populations in Richmond and surrounding areas. My background is deep in finance, as well as school business, finance, and curriculum instruction. So I culminated my experience in public education as a superintendent of Santa Ana Unified School District in 2019, actually. So have had various experiences during my journey around finance and curriculum, but it has been a really great ride, and I continue to ride it out for students. So I would love to introduce my esteemed panel, starting with Ms. Lis Bluford, MAT 2014 Rossier School. Lis is a master educator of EdLight. And next we have Michael McAlister, EdD 2018 Rossier School. He currently serves as Education Leadership Executive for Apple Incorporated. Next we have Ashley Naranjo, ME student, 2018 Rossier School, Manager of Education Engagement and Strategic Partnerships for the Smithsonian. And lastly, Shawn Smith, 2005 EdD, my year, Chief Innovative Officer of McGraw Hill Education. Welcome, panelists. Before we get started in the question and answer, I think it'd be great if maybe you could share a little bit of your journey and your story and your current role of how you're serving students in your current capacity. So why don't we start with Lis?
Hi, everybody. I'm Lis. And a little bit of background on me is that I come from a non-traditional education background with that. I did Teach for America and worked mainly in charter schools. So it was a non-traditional start. And then once I had been doing that for a few years, I really wanted to learn more. And that's why I came to USC, because I wanted to learn about different school models. And I continued after USC working in uncommon schools. And in my time there over 10 years, I realized that one thing that was important to me was when schools and teachers focused on actual student work and using actual paperwork to reflect on progress, to build student portfolios and tracking feedback. And that was really important to me. And I kind of got really nerdy about it and was able to connect with an entrepreneur in my area who was doing an education startup. And so I started to consult for him on how to bring student work front and center for schools. And after doing that consulting for about a year, I transitioned full time to working for EdLight. And so in my role, I do marketing, I do training, customer support, and the main part of my job is advising on curriculum and our product, which is a EdTech product. And it definitely was a difficult transition out of the classroom, but I'm so glad I took the leap. And I'm able to work in all things EdTech now and have that background and be able to actually create a product that is something that teachers can use every single day and is informed by best practices. And so I'm excited to share more about my journey with you all today. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz. Next, we have Michael. Michael, why don't you share some interesting tidbits with us?
Well, I'll try. I can't believe I ended up here, actually, to be honest. I went, I guess this whole thing kind of started while I was an exchange student in high school in Norway, if you can believe that. And the most amazing thing happened to me sitting in a classroom where I didn't speak one word. And that feeling of fear and adventure and everything else just really kind of changed the way I looked at things. And I decided that no matter what, I was going to put myself in a position of intelligent, responsible risk as often as I could. And I did that very thing. After I got out of Berkeley, rather than going to law school, much to my parents' displeasure, I went to New York and was part of a theater company there. And then after I was semi-successful, believe it or not, as a stand-up comedian, made my living as a comic for a while. And then I fell into teaching at my old middle school, if you can believe that. My 8th grade history teacher was dying of cancer and he needed somebody to fill in, and I had an emergency credential and was fortunate enough to be able to walk into my old classroom and, kind of give back what had been given to me so beautifully all those years before. Well, from that point on, things just kind of took off, and I was just hanging on to a caboose because I then was hired by my old high school, and I taught economics and political science and some history and psychology. And after doing that for 7 years, I took a sabbatical and I studied Buddhism in Thailand and Nepal. And then for 6 months of silence, I was at the San Francisco Zen Center at Green Gulch Farm in Marin County. I almost ordained as a priest and figured that it was pretty much a wash, whether I was cutting carrots mindfully or tending to high school seniors. They're both arrogant and afraid. So that is like the coolest animal in the jungle. When you've got someone like that. And I was around them just all the time. My entire high school career was teaching these seniors, and I absolutely loved it. Then went on to the administrative world, where I was the tech coordinator for Marimani High School. We put a 1-to-1 program in, which was at times just this miserable experience and also so thrilling. After 3 years there, I became principal at Northgate High School in Walnut Creek, California. And my second year into doing that, we started implementing some really serious technological adjustments and enhancements on site. And I also decided, why not just pile it all on? I decided to get my doctorate, and I did it in the Global Executive Program at SC Phi-Don. And what I learned in that program and what I was able to bring back into my school was it was so rich. It was so powerful. And I just feel so blessed that I was able to, parlay that risk into something that kind of paid off. I got my school set up for COVID. It was a surprise and kind of a sad thing, but let's get everybody prepped and ready for this. And once that happened, I kid you not, I got a phone call, and a phone call from somebody who had known me as believe it or not only was I his kid sister's teacher, but he also knew me as a performer. And I ended up getting hired at Apple. And boy, I never would have predicted that. I never would have predicted that I would have been a teacher or a monk or a comic either. So I think it's just all about just get out there, see what happens. And that's exactly where I am right now. I mean, all these things have led perfectly to where I am. And I would argue that that's the case for each of us already. But so I guess that's me.
Well, thank you, Michael. And I'm sure we're going to hear more about your rich story as we go through the questions. Ashley, it'd be great to hear from you at this time.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Naranjo. I'm coming to you from the East Coast. So I'm originally from Washington, D.C. I'm a museum educator at the Smithsonian, and that title can actually translate into a lot of different roles within the field. I think most people probably think of leading field trip tours or developing kind of hands-on activities in a gallery. But really the majority of my work has actually focused on how museums can best support pre-K through 12 classrooms nationwide. And so I've led projects and research on digital platforms. One platform in particular, the Smithsonian Learning Lab, which is basically a digital platform where you can access all of the Smithsonian's digitized content, different media, primary sources, that sort of thing, and build them into collections. And so a great majority of my career has gone into that platform specifically. And then when COVID hit, I switched roles. And now at the Smithsonian, part of my role is also thinking about the digital divide. And so recently I led an initiative that was all about getting kind of print hands-on materials to folks that are kind of caught in the digital divide at the moment. So free activity guides, to keep kids learning during the summer and winter breaks. Thinking about how we can serve kids nationwide, during times like this, kind of crisis management, to be quite honest. Previously, I went to undergrad at BC, Boston College. And then in 2018, I graduated from USC with a learning design and technology master's degree. And I have to say, I feel like, 2018 was like the perfect time to be kind of, gaining all of these skills. It was also great because I did it while I was working at the Smithsonian too. So all of my case studies, all of my problems of practice were really being applied in real time too. So looking forward to being with you all today.
Fantastic, thank you. And last but not least, Shawn, you tell us.
Hey everybody, good afternoon from New York. And as Stefanie said, I graduated in 2005 from USC, so 16 years ago, and at 29 finished and defended my dissertation. So it's been definitely a journey from there. I like to kind of think about my professional career in 3 chapters. The first chapter was largely traditional. I spent 15 years inside 4 different public education systems, 2 in California, 2 in Illinois, in a variety of roles. I was a teacher, I was an assistant principal, became a principal, a curriculum director, and then I was chief of schools for Chicago Public Schools. And it's there where kind of that led me to kind of chapter 2 of my career, and I became an ed tech entrepreneur. So I raised a series of rounds of investment and built an ed tech company with a fellow USC alum. And spent a decade growing that business and really kind of helping school systems as they think about transitioning from analog to digital. And that was the primary driver of that business. And then today I find myself in chapter 3, and I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for McGraw Hill. Largely, my work involves kind of thinking about the digital strategy and fragmented data sets and how we can draw lots of different data from kids, not just about their academic performance, but kind of about social emotional learning and their background and their cognitive functioning, and how we can turn those insights into kind of recommended instructional strategies and content for kids. And that's largely what I'm working on today. Happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. As you can see, these are some pretty dynamic panelists who have had a multitude of experiences across the educational landscape. And so this session that we're doing today is really to highlight just different types of opportunities, not specific to our individual experience, but just in terms of what you can do as an educator throughout the country, throughout the world, and where these skills can be transferable into other spaces. So really happy to begin to hear your stories this morning or this afternoon. So let's dig into some questions, and I'll start with Shawn. So feel free to jump in. Rest of the panelists after Shawn has finished responding to this first question, but let's get started. So Shawn, several of you are working in a business setting. with a focus on education. So how does it differ from work in your school settings? And what skills did you find yourself needing to develop to be successful in these alternative spaces?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I would say that I often say that I gave myself an MBA by just kind of doing the work. But one of the skills that I can tell you that I didn't have any of was the business side of everything. So how to understand forecasting and reading a P&L chart and being able to really understand the unit economics of the business side of education. It's interesting because, as educators, typically most of us got into this profession because there was a calling, right? I think most of us had that experience at some point in our lives where we felt called to this profession. And I think that's absolutely true for me. But one of the things that, I do think as a profession, sometimes we think about the business side of it in kind of a dirty word sometimes. And, for me, I got into this because I'm super passionate about transforming the way and improving the way kids learn. And what I realized was there's lots of ways to make that impact. And as a teacher, I love doing it. As an administrator, I love doing it. But I also wanted a larger scale. I wanted to be, more than just the community that I was serving. I wanted to kind of tap into, our nation and think about it that way. And so that led me to the business side. And one of the skills that, I had to learn was figuring out the business of education. And that's a component of it. But what I will say is that for me, the mission has never changed. The mission has always been helping people understand how we learn. And because, with learning opens up, limitless possibilities for your future. And so I have absolutely loved understanding and learning the business side of it because I see the scale and the impact of it. And I also think that, there is a juxtaposition between this kind of nonprofit, work of us as educators, and then kind of thinking about, a capitalist society and how those two things converge. And I think there's value statements around those that sometimes we're scared to talk about. So hopefully, if you're out there and you have questions about it, ask, because this is a great opportunity in a panel like this. And I'm happy to share kind of some of my lessons learned with that as well. And I'd love to hear from some of the other panelists, because it's an interesting topic.
Yeah. Before I let someone else take it away, being an MBA and kind of jumping into education, it was really an eye-opener of how much we don't focus on business because it's like that dirty word. But there is a business aspect that you have to manage an organization well. You have to fund resource programs well in order to get the results that you're looking for. So great point. Any other panelists want to jump in there? Lis?
Yeah, I think that for me, it was advantageous to start in education and with kids before going to business, because the number one thing in the classroom for me that made the difference was relationships with my students. And the stronger the relationship was, like, the better my class was. And when I switched over to business and was getting into training and support and sales, that was the biggest thing, was that I need to listen to whoever I'm talking to, like, what do they want and what do they need? And all people are the same with that, regardless of their age. And I think that skill really transferred over because I had spent years developing my ability to, like, create a relationship quickly with a stranger or like a new student or someone who just walks into my classroom. And so that was like a big takeaway. It's like, we're all just people. And then the other thing is just like managing the short-term and the long-term needs simultaneously are so similar in the classroom. Like, the way I had to think about things of like, okay, is this a need in this moment or longer term? That also transferred over to the business side of things for me a lot. I think that I was able to, weigh the needs in the moment. Like, you make a million decisions in the classroom in the moment as a teacher, and it's the same thing at like in business, is you're weighing the short-term and long-term needs separately. And I think for me, like, having to make quick decisions about those types of things really transferred from the classroom.
Awesome. Ashley, I see you had a +1 to Lis's comments. You want to say anything about that?
Yeah, sure. I was just going to say, I mean, I think when we think about teaching as a skill. Obviously, we're all very used to wearing multiple different hats at different times. But I think, thinking about the work that I do on a regular basis is thinking about all of my stakeholders, whether it's the students that are in my classroom, the parents, the principals, administrators, curriculum coordinators, et cetera. You kind of start to see that same thing, as you work in different organizations as well. Things like project management, focusing on a goal and getting a big group of people to that end goal, knowing that there are some hiccups along the way, interfacing with a variety of different audiences too, right? A teacher has those opportunities on a regular basis to kind of connect with different audiences. And then communications, right? I mean, from email to presentations to, who you're speaking to, I think all of those things really transfer in a, business or even nonprofit organization too. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Well, let's go to the next question then. Let's see, moving into a new industry or functional area can be very challenging without direct experience or a necessary skill set. How have you overcome this challenge? Let's start with Lis.
Yeah, I mean, personally for me, this was a challenge. I would get someone glancing over my resume and be like, oh, you're just a teacher. Like I felt like I was dismissed in quite a few instances. And I think that for me, it was just all about networking personally and getting them to know me as a person. And so networking in every sense of it, I was so aggressive on LinkedIn all the time. And I also didn't look at it of saying I have to end my job in the classroom today and start a new job in ed tech tomorrow. It was what small projects can I take on while I'm still in the classroom to help that transition be easier? Who is someone that I really respect? Maybe I can write a blog post for their company. Maybe I can reach out and see if anyone needs consulting on this. And so it was leveraging the relationships I already had. So what were the ed tech products my school was already using that I would love to advocate for, like tweeting about those different products, and just really making sure that I knew that the transition would be a little bit slow, but it was going to come from those personal connections that I had made. And once I understood that, I had a much easier time. Instead of just going and being like, hi, I need a job. It's like, no, what can I do for you? Like, how can I strengthen this relationship? So when a job does become available, you think of me as Lis instead of thinking about the fact that my experience is only in the classroom. And so leveraging the network in that way was just a game changer for me.
Awesome. Any other thoughts from the other panelists?
I would say something, Stefanie, but the list touches on something that I think is so critical for every single person who is listening. And that is, if you prepare yourself to receive the universe's serendipity, it's going to happen, but you got to prepare for it. And so often we put blinders on, we get so focused on something that we lose the opportunity that is waiting for us. And so I just think, I can't say it any better than Lis. You did a great job there. But to add to that, get your LinkedIn profile absolutely up to par. It's got to happen. That is the way that social networking works, in whether you're in education, nonprofit, or private sector. Make sure that happens. And if it's not really good, get it good and get somebody who can help you to get it good. I would also say the greatest training, the number of transferable skills that come from being in a classroom or come from being in administration of an educational institution are so amazing. They can really fit and function beautifully in any number of fields. So going back to what I said initially, be open to that. Be ready for that chance. Be ready for that risk to find you.
Nice. That's really good advice for our panelists, for our visitors. Well, let's move into the next question then. what inspired you to look for opportunities outside of traditional career paths in education? You know, most people think about, you know, well, I'm a teacher, I'm a counselor, or I'm a, you know, I work in the schools and I'm going to progress to the AP or to the, you know, district office, or, you know, they have this linear look at how to promote. So what inspired you to look outside and move forward? Michael, why don't you take this one?
Well, it's like I said, I think one of the things you learn when you're sitting in silence is to just be available to whatever is happening. Either, you know, my back pain or my knee pain or my bliss or whatever it was. If you just kind of sit with it and meet it. And one of the things that I was sitting with and meeting every single day were the challenges related to running a large comprehensive high school and all the stakeholders with, in many cases, disparate needs. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So when this opportunity to go into the private sector, to go into tech kind of came my way, it not only surprised me, it also reminded me that life is short, and that, you know, for me to say, well, I'm a principal, is a rather fixed mindset that, you know, well, it's not a bad thing. I just have never looked at myself as fulfilling a role and staying there, because everything evolves. And in terms of development, I mean, you pointed out, Stefanie, really nicely. Human development is not linear. It slops forward and sloshes back and so forth. And so if you're up for that within, if you can just register and engage a kind of internality, man, you can get that to align with some degree of congruence with what's going on in the world. And, you know, that's what happened to me. It was not something, I mean, I will say, one of the things that I learned at Rossier, get the LinkedIn profile up to par, okay? I did that, and that was what created, I think, a deeper availability, and allowed for, you know, the next steps to kind of unfold, none of which I expected. So it was, so much was surprised, but I would also say what Rossier helped me do, and my training, you know, in the principal's chair helped me do, was prepare for the unexpected.
Anyone else have any sage advice for our audience?
I would just say that I was ridiculously naive, and I'm glad I was, because probably had I known all the challenges that would come with it, looking back, you know, you kind of like worry about that. But the biggest thing for me as an entrepreneur was I had an idea, and I was really persistent that I wanted to see the idea come to life. And I hear that from so many people that, you know, have these ideas and find themselves in positions or in jobs where they don't feel like they can actually, you know, bring that to fruition. And so I wanted to kind of just take that idea and run with it. And so I figured out how to network with people that, you know, gave money to these types of things, and venture capital firms, and bring those types of ideas to life. And that, for me, you know, take the risk is what I would say.
Yeah. Similar to what you both talk about. In my path, I feel like the thing that spurred me on and made me look outside of traditional paths was really curiosity and wanting to sincerely solve a problem the best I could, right? So when it came to being in the finance office of a school district, like, I didn't let the fact that my seat defined what I was supposed to be doing in that organization. I wanted to know more, like, well, why do we have to allocate funds in this way? Like, when you say, you know, good instruction, well, what does that look like? And so I just kept asking these questions that in my mind, I'm thinking, well, they're going to help me do my job better. But really, they kind of opened up other doors to other opportunities, just because I was open to asking questions and trying to do things for students in a different way that hadn't been done before. And ultimately ended up in a nonprofit and in philanthropy to do just that. I never thought that I'd be the CEO of a philanthropic organization. I mean, it's great, but I mean, who knew that that job existed? I mean, when I was in high school, I had no idea what a philanthropic organization was. So, you know, it's just asking those questions and staying true to your own passion and your own, you know, internal compass of what you can do and how you can make things better. So I want to let you guys talk some more. One thing before we get to the next question, I'd really like to remind our audience that you can submit questions of your own in the Q&A. So if you want to know more about a particular thing or a comment that we've talked about, or even something that we haven't talked about, please hit us up in the Q&A, and hopefully we can help, you know, stir that conversation. So one more question. What role have mentors played in helping you to navigate your career moves? And let's start with Ashley.
Yeah, I think about the beginning of my own museum education career, and I was really lucky to have a mentor who had been kind of in the game, so to speak, for decades. Claudine Brown, who actually many of the people in museum education kind of, you know, stand on her shoulders, her legacy for sure. But one of the you know, just kind of sage moments of wisdom that she gave to me was this idea of having an informal board of directors for yourself. And I just thought that was so brilliant, because I think a lot of times, at least at the Smithsonian, I think we're always strategic planning, right? Like we have, you know, everything from you know, those mission statements and vision statements and values and all of that, right, that you go through on that regular basis, and you really do think about critically, but trying to think about it for yourself, and thinking about, you know, especially with a board of directors, it doesn't necessarily have to be people that are in your field. Are there people that are supporting you, challenging you, keeping you honest about the goals that you're setting? Are there people that are kind of pushing your thinking in different ways? Are there people that are completely outside of your field that are helping you have kind of some of those moments of divergent thinking? So really kind of thinking about yourself as an organization, and then kind of moving from there, keeping in contact with good mentors, keeping in contact with, you know, the why of what you're doing, you know, within your own role too. So,
thank you for that. Any other thoughts, panelists?
I think mentors played, you know, such a huge role in this, and especially for me, kind of thinking about the business side of it and being an entrepreneur. It's slight poetry, but I had a mentor once tell me, I want you to think about, and this is probably, people have heard about this before, but I had never heard it, and I thought it was a great metaphor. Thinking about mirrors, windows, and doors. And he said to me, from a mirror perspective, let me help you see other people like you in business. And from, you know, from a window perspective, he said, let me open up a world of possibilities to you and see yourself in that. And from a door perspective, he said, let me open these doors and help you connect to other people that are going to be helpful in the journey. And that has been something that has stayed with me for a long time.
If I could just add just one thing, Stefanie, I believe I shared this with you recently. I had at the very beginning, when I was starting teaching, and I was so exhausted, and I realized I would show up every morning and I had all these eyeballs looking at me, and I had this mentor tell me, you know, anything great in life takes a combination of courage and curiosity. And that's all he said. And I was just kind of sitting there, class was about to start. I'm like, my God, he's right. And so, and I still think about that. I still think about, like, you know, the most worthy endeavors, you know, no matter what the outcome, the endeavor itself, if it's inspired by courage and curiosity and generosity for all concerned, boom, man, what a thrill ride.
Awesome. You did share that with me, and you know, is some of my students, the first thing they said is the first thing he talked about was courage. And I think in leadership and in teaching kids and in leading kids, you have to be courageous. It's hard to get up there in front of a group of kids and, you know, capture their attention and inspire them and motivate them, move them forward. And guess what? Adults are just big kids. So you know, no matter where you are, trying to get adults to see things differently and to lead them in other spaces requires that courage and you know, continued curiosity of how to do it better. So I appreciate that. We have a couple.
Oh, sorry.
No,
I was just gonna say, I did see one question in the chat, and this is my personal perspective on this, but somebody asked about not having a teaching credential and transitioning into nonprofits or maybe even a different sector. I would say outside of public education, people don't care about the credentials. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. Yep, I agree. Well, let's go to some of those questions in the chat. Let's see. Here's one. Unfortunately, in urban education, the network of technical core are limited, especially when colleagues are not using tech available to them. How do you face the insecurity of not knowing those outside possibilities? I think, Michael, you were gonna, was that one that you wanted to take?
Which is, I'm trying to follow you here, Steph. What's which one?
It's the first one. Unfortunately, in urban education, the network of technical core is limited.
Well, so here's what I noticed in my former district. We were in this panic mode as the pandemic kind of increased, and we have this amazing array of kids, several of whom, you know, their families are worth millions of dollars, and several of whom are, you know, looking at public assistance in any manner of ways. And what our district did, I think, rather brilliantly, was they made sure that every teacher knew it's crunch time. It's crunch time. And whether you don't like doing this or not becomes less of an issue in terms of what we need to do to serve the community and help these kids still maintain learning and a process of learning through which they can, you know, advance. And all I can speak to is how it worked for us. We went from a very reluctant faculty, you know, only about half the faculty was ever using any type of tech for anything other than taking roll. And suddenly they had to learn, you know, Zoom technology. And then from Zoom, they had to figure out how to use some type of learning management array or system of getting assignments to their kids beyond just email. And on my particular side, I had teachers who were still didn't even answer emails. So it was those conversations that I just kind of kept leaning into. District-wide, there were some real gaps in terms of the kind of support that was given. And I made note of that. And I made note of that in a way that didn't endear me to lots of people who had loved the fact that they didn't, forgive me, they didn't have to do much. And so I called it out. And I called it out not so that I could call it out, you know, for giggles. I called it out because the kids were suffering because of their intransigence. And so as long as, you know, at a cellular level, you're looking at why are we here? We're here for kids, period. We're here for kids. And so if you know, you're going to make decisions that are going to, you know, get in the way of that, you know, that need, then it is my job as a, you know, site leader to stand up and say, no. So I guess that's the best way I can answer it. Sometimes compassionate, loving thing you can say is no way. You know, and that's, you know, and there wasn't anything heroic about that. I had tons of people who were supporting that. You know, that wasn't, I mean, I was out on a limb because it was my voice, but that was my job. I sat in the big chair. So it's like somebody had to do it. And as a result, I think the district is you know, has benefited substantially despite the distraction, you know, that COVID has offered. I think COVID has also offered us an inspiration to be better, that there is no such thing as a return to normal. There's no such thing. So are you ready? You know?
Are you ready? So that's a great point. And so what are you doing? This is open to all panelists. What are you doing in the post-COVID world in terms of helping educators kind of make that transition past COVID? And how can others, like, how do you view that? Like, how are we thinking about the post-COVID educational landscape?
Well, I would start by just jumping in saying that we have got to tackle, like, what does the classroom of the future look like now that we're in this kind of post-COVID world? And while the vast majority of kids struggled to learn in that particular context at home online, there were definitely some nuggets that I hope, and silver linings that I hope don't go away. Things like flexible schedules. Schools should absolutely have permission to rethink the way we do seat time today, because we know that kids can, in fact, actually be connected and learn in shorter snippets of time in different locations, and that's okay. I think, you know, great teachers out there figured out how to personalize the instruction, even over Zoom or Google Meets, if you will, because they had to. And I think that was a key piece of it as well. And so I think the more we can drive at a personalized experience for kids inside a community of learners, that has to redefine, like, what this classroom of the future looks like. So I would say flexible schedules, the ability to kind of provide a curriculum that can truly be anywhere, anytime. And then we've got to get at the authenticity and authentic experiences for kids kind of in the learning process. I think those are some nuggets that came out of the pandemic that I hope we don't lose.
Yeah, yeah.
And can I just, yes, and you there, Shawn, beautifully said. I would also say that so much of this panel is about diverse pathways. Okay, to tell you to go become a principal or a superintendent, or just relish the fact that you're a teacher, with your hands directly involved in the next generation. All that is really, that it's valuable, and I would recommend that you do it. It certainly has benefited me. But what we're really looking at here is, how do you stay available to whatever is coming your way? And how do you lean into, to use the cliche, lean into what you want? What is it? Ask yourself this question: what is the most important thing? What is the most important thing? And then that can help you narrow stuff down. I mean, I can see in the chat here, we've got people saying, like, well, what do I do on my resume when I'm just a teacher? There is no such thing as just a teacher. Are you kidding me? Do you realize the skill set that you have? What are you supposed to do in an interview? Be yourself, be authentic, and make sure that if you don't know something, you don't try to BS your way through it. Be honest, and what does that do? Well, whether you stay in the classroom, you go into administration, you go into nonprofit, private sector, government, it doesn't matter. You're taking a skill set that you're building that's infused with courage, curiosity, and generosity. And now you're affecting enormous change on the, in the landscape, whatever landscape it is you decide to walk into. I'll drop the mic now.
I want to add on to that question a little bit. As part of my role, I talk to, hundreds of principals, and over the summer, we've been having a lot of conversations of what is your priority for next school year. And it has really amazed me to talk to a school in rural Mississippi and a school in Boston and get two completely different answers. And it's, for me in my role, it's really been eye-opening to see that not every school has the same priority, because everyone had really different years last year. And schools, some of them had really low rigor, some of them had really high rigor, some of them, are just want to get their teachers in the building and getting along. And so there's so many different priorities. And so you have to have those that understanding that, schools are all buying completely different products for completely different reasons. And it's up to you, like, at least for me in my role, to really listen to that and know that that's why are so many ed tech organizations, because everyone has different priorities. And for me, like, what was important to me in my school in the past few years was that we wanted, a platform that would help us align classwork and intervention. And we wanted something that would digitize student portfolios. And there were all these things that were important to us, but that's constantly evolving as different things like COVID come up. And so I just think it's so much of all of our roles here are to be responsive to what the needs are of people, and to really listen to them, and create products and pathways that are going to be a good fit, because the students that I'm working with on a product today are different than the students that Ashley is working with, and Shawn is designing a product that might be completely for a third group of students. And so there are so many different little needs, and so I just think it's important to just know that that's what's so cool about creating your own pathway is because you think about what's important to you, what matters to you, and what excites you, and then find a pathway that aligns to that, I think.
Thank you. So let's go in a little bit different direction, because we've kind of gone down this pathway. Let's talk about, generally speaking, when you shift outside of the classroom, when you change directions, that usually involves some risk. Right? That there's a shift there, and there's an opportunity gap. So can you share with us some of the risks that you've taken in pursuing these other avenues of education? Let's start with Ashley, if you can jump in, that'd be great. I'm not sure if your internet is stable.
Sure, my internet is a little unstable, so feel free to let me know if I'm not coming through clearly, but I'll try. So, one of the things that I was thinking about with this too is, in terms of risks and things like that, the majority of museum educators go through a very specific program. There's about, 10 to 15 of them in the country in museum education. And I went to, the Rossier School in Learning Design and Technology. I was kind of a unicorn in my cohort, at least, of not being in a typical traditional setting. And I think that actual risk, just even in going to that program, allowed me to see the ecosystem of education differently. Just within our cohort, we had classroom teachers, we had after school providers, we had pre-K providers, we had folks that were teaching special ed, folks that were teaching in the jail systems, and a museum educator. And so even just that opportunity and that risk of being able to put myself in kind of a moment outside of my typical field, I think I bring a lot more to my position as a museum educator now, by being able to kind of make those connections and think about the ecosystem a little bit differently too. So
great. Shawn, what risks can you talk about for us?
Yeah, so I'm not advising this for everybody, so it comes with a word of warning, but I took a financial risk. I cashed out my teacher retirement in my mid-30s and all of my life savings and started a business. And it was a roll of the dice, but I think that's, for me, I was passionate about the idea. I believed in it. I was persistent with it. And there was a lot of stressful times with that, but I would probably do it all over again, because I think, back to your point, Stefanie, diverse pathways and kind of leaving that traditional hierarchy of education, it's a risk. And whether it's a financial risk, an emotional risk, a well-being risk with your family, all of those things, a happiness risk, it's a risk. But oftentimes, I think the risk is what the joy is in the journey, and for people.
Michael, I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, here's the thing. I think everybody ought to just loosen their shoes. It's going to find you. It's going to find you if you do the work, and the work is internal. You know, I mean, Shawn, I love what you just said, man. I mean, it's risk, just risk, you know, and be fearless, be absolutely fearless. This could fail. Woohoo, now I'm alive, you know? And I'm not trying to be flip about this because they're very real issues. They're very real issues. I know for me, when I got out as an undergraduate and I was getting ready to go to law school, and I was already, you know, kind of planning my life out, and it's like, you know, forgive the expression, but it's like, it was bullshit. It is not something I wanted to do. It was not something I wanted to do, but there was all this pressure. So what was the risk? The risk was going to New York and joining a theater company. That was the risk. That was mine. I don't think it's necessarily good for everybody. Okay, but it's like you put yourself in a position where all sorts of bad things and great things could happen, and now you are living what all the ancients dreamed could someday be, you know, a possibility for humanity. And I think there's a big responsibility for each of us to put ourselves in that position of not knowing and being very comfortable with not knowing.
So you bring up a really good point, and I didn't want to leave this, but I think it's really a good time to really add on to that. So I'm ready to take the risk. You know, I've got my head around that. I'm going to try to do something. I'm going to figure out how to get them to see my resume, because I'm not exactly sure how that works. But what can I do to broaden my horizon? And this is part of one of the chat questions. Like, what can I do to broaden my horizon so that I can be ready to receive? Like, how does that happen? Like, if I don't even know what's out there, how do I prepare for it?
Fill your passport twice.
I would echo that. Get out of your comfort zone and hang out with people that you're not comfortable hanging out with, that are not in the traditional rhythm and cadence of your everyday life. I mean, there's no better medicine for you know, the inspiration to take a risk than, you know, being around people that are full of life.
I don't disagree with you all. I love the energy that you bring in around this, because it is nerve-wracking. Like how there's no book. You just gotta kind of try it. You gotta network, you gotta ask people, and you gotta be curious and vulnerable enough to open yourself up to something you don't know.
And Stefanie, I keep going back to what you said. It's curiosity, and you're passionate about something. Find that North Star and just keep digging and clawing until something opens up, because it will.
Yeah. I've known people who've switched careers because they think there's better money somewhere. That's not the reason to do it. At least it wasn't the reason for me. It was never about the money. It has never been about the money. I mean, obviously you want to eat, but you're going to be happy when you're solving the problem that you care about, or when you're following your passion, or learning something that you deeply have a passion for and enjoy. It's not about, okay, but it doesn't pay. Well, teaching didn't pay. I mean, not in the greater sense. So do it because it means something to you, not because it's a good opportunity.
And I think when you're thinking about those opportunities, one piece of advice someone gave me once is that not every job that exists or is going to exist is going to be posted on LinkedIn. There are so many jobs that companies are thinking about hiring for soon, and they end up meeting someone along the way that they hire before the job is even posted. And just know that things might be coming and they might not get posted about. And so that's where your relationships and networking come in. I've heard this happen to so many people. So just don't think that the only options are the new job postings, like on a job posting site. Like there's more. You just have to, put yourself out there.
Yep. So agree.
I think that's great. I totally agree with that. It's almost like the answer in this panel is really, there's a community out there that supports you, and we're here to kind of, say you can do it.
Absolutely. My experience with not just the Trojan Network, but the Trojan Network is a great start. You're here, you're among family. You use your connections. Like, don't be afraid to make yourself vulnerable and ask the question that you really want to know. If somebody has a really great LinkedIn profile and you're kind of not sure about it, because I mean, I've been there recently. And so the point is you ask somebody, or you get advice for somebody who, is a little bit more engaged in it. You talk to a teacher who's doing something that, it's like, well, how did you get appointed to that committee, or how did you take on that project? And let them tell you, let them help you through like making other connections that you don't have. I used to be that closed in person who was like, well, it's not within my scope, so I'm not going to try. And that doesn't get you to where you want to be. Be inspired, be courageous, be curious, and take a chance. All right. Let's see. There's some other things in the chat, so I'm going to try to grab a few more things. Most of them have been answered. You guys have been awesome.
There's one thing, Stefanie, that I was noticing as I started looking through the chat. I think it's really important to ask yourself, and you touched on this in your last comment beautifully. How do you measure wealth? How do you measure wealth? I mean, really, it's such a cliche. But if we're looking at this, maximizing the number of lives we can touch in really, really positive, loving ways, man, that's worth a lot. By the end of our lives, the number of people at your funeral still depends on the weather. How many lives can you touch? How much love has there been, that you've been able to bestow and receive? Man, it's just it's just kind of a whole different thing.
Absolutely. Well, we're rolling up on 1 o'clock, so I realize that our time is growing shorter. So why don't we take a moment, and why don't you gather your thoughts and maybe give some advice or some parting thoughts to our audience before we wrap it up and turn it over to our facilitator. Anybody want to get started? Or I don't want to call you out if you're not ready.
I can jump in. Hopefully my connectivity is a little bit better now, but we'll see. One of the things I added in the chat, and you'll probably see, obviously here too, even with this panel, is the idea of asking other educators for informational interviews, even just 30 minutes. I mean, now that there's Zoom, obviously, you can connect with anybody across the country. But even, someone that's in your region, take them out for a cup of coffee. People love to talk about their own pathways. They want to support the next kind of generation of folks that might be within their fields. And then listen to really what they have to say. Don't go into it thinking like, hopefully this person will connect me to the right job, but really think about what resonated with you in their pathway. I had a friend who was switching into the museum education field, and she was like, how do I get started? And especially at the time that she was, writing to me and asking me for advice, I was saying, there's not that many openings, to be quite honest. And so I said, but you might, look into object-based learning. It's a thing that's in museums. Everyone has to know it. Take an open online course. So she took that course, she cobbled together some, contract work in a few different museums over time. And within a year, the job opening to actually create 2.0 of that course opened up, and she was, ready. She knew what the course was like. She had taken it as a participant. She had gone to a few different sites, so she knew about museum education. And right away, she had kind of an expertise that others who were applying for that job didn't have. She had, done curriculum before. She had done lesson planning. She understood student outcomes, all of those things. And so I think too, a lot of what we're saying saying too is these transferable skills that you have in education, thinking about who your network is, and then really kind of being open to all of the possibilities that might be out there too.
Thank you. That's excellent advice. Excellent. Shawn.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'll keep it simple and short. I would just say follow your passion. It's not about the destination. The journey is the reward. And that has always served me well.
Awesome. Awesome. Michael?
This is going to sound so funny and counterintuitive, but let go. Let go. That doesn't mean push away. It means open. Open. Be there. Open. Okay. And be prepared. Be prepared for what that openness will attract. You know, and I'm not talking, it sounds like The Secret or something. It's not, that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that you create an availability internally. You, as Gandhi said, you know, we change the world only because we are changed by it. And so I think there's something to be said for those of you that can open your hearts and minds to what is really going on in your experience. That authenticity is what is going to just open doors and open other hearts and minds. So whether you're in the classroom, you're in administration, or you decide to do something entrepreneurial or you know, shift gears, you are embodying that grace, you know. And it's hard not to get kind of, you know, spiritual and psychological about this stuff, really. But don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of that. You know, this calling each of us has had as educators is because we recognized and saw something that needed our attention. And after all, isn't that what life is about? Isn't it about being helpful? Isn't it about being a good partner, you know, a good parent, whether or not you decide to have kids, a good citizen and a good steward of the planet? Do all that. And can you do it in any capacity? Boom.
I love your energy. Liz.
I think to start is just because you start as a teacher, don't ever think of yourself as just a teacher, because no one on this side of things thinks of you like that. And so you have to stop thinking about yourself like that too. And what gets people energized by that is when you bring certain energy. So what, like Shawn said, find your passion, discover what is the thing that matters most to you as an educator that gets you like really riled up, really excited and energized, and that passion will be contagious. And so I just think that switching fields, it's scary, but you have to start small and you have to work actively over time sometimes. You got to think outside the box sometimes, but I promise you, like, those skills are so transferable and you're going to just light up whatever alternate path you take.
Absolutely. I just appreciate this panel and the energy that you have brought today, because it takes courage to even consider doing something that's kind of out of the norm, but the rewards are so great for what I consider to be, there's risk there, but the rewards are like 10 times, they're tenfold what you're going to risk. And, you know, the one thing I always think about is, you know, if you don't like it, you can always go back to being, you know, a teacher or a principal. You know, we always need great teachers, principals, educators. So it's not like you know, if you close the door, you'll never be able to go back. I'm not one who goes backwards ever. I try not to, that's not my thing. But if you're that risk averse, think about the fact that there's always that. You always have your credential if you maintain your credential. You always have opportunities to help kids. And that's the baseline of what we do always. So consider stretching yourself, consider moving in a direction, you know, let your energy flow and your passion flow so that, you know, you can kind of expand the world of possibilities for all of us. You're the next generation. You know, we're here to tell you what we know, what we've been through, but now it's your turn. So what are you prepared to do? And we're here to help. Kind of like Home Depot, we're here to help. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. I'll turn it back over to Matt, and have a wonderfully fighting day.
Thank you, Stefanie. Thank you for moderating and guiding such a wonderful